What was the dumbest rule that was put in place in your school? You can buy school sweaters, but you can't wear them in school. In my primary school, there was a rule for a while that if one child wanted to go and use the bathroom, the entire class had to go with them. In the best cases, a single kid had the power to disrupt a particularly boring lesson so that everyone could get up and walk literally 20 meters to the toilet block. Small school. In the worst cases, kids would wet themselves in their chairs because they were too afraid and embarrassed to ask. I remember seeing a classmate get up out of their plastic chair and leave a puddle behind. If any of the guys tried to skip the showers, they had to show up after school for supervised shower practice with the gym teacher. As an adult, it sounds so much creepier now. Wearing your tie with the front part more than about an inch longer than the thin part would get you a lunchtime detention. Wearing more than one tie at a time would get you an after school detention. No questions asked. The fashion was to wear your ties super short as you could realistically get away with. The school tried to crack down on that, so in protest people started wearing their ties as long as possible. When someone sewed two ties together to make a 5-foot monstrosity that was down to her ankles, the deputy head flipped the frick out in the middle of the canteen so mightily that we thought she was going to burst into flame. Happy days, happy days.
End.
This was a rule at a school I worked at, rather than one I attended. Only people with parking passes could swipe in at the back door near where the cars were parked. People without cars frequently used the back door because it was the most direct route to the grocery store behind us. They shared a parking lot. We had some valuable electronics go missing, and since the security guards in the lobby apparently didn't see anything, it was decided they must use the back door. Their solution was to take away card-based access from all of the staff and faculty and only give it to people with cars. I pointed out that leaving the building via that door did not require a card, so if someone wanted to steal something, they could enter through the front door and still leave via the back door. When I also explained the frustration from the staff and faculty that previously had used the door to go grab stuff at the store, it was suggested that we just borrow the cards of people with parking passes to get back in. To say they did not understand security would be an understatement. In my primary school, the boys' stalls were divided among classes, and boys were only allowed to use the stalls for their class. All because one kid had the habit of picking up his poo and writing all over the stall. My high school spent a shoot ton of money remodeling their gymnasium over one summer. When the next school year began, students were not allowed to use it because the administration didn't want to ruin the floor or the new bleachers. So, no PE class inside, no indoor basketball/volleyball, no indoor running, no indoor activity, period. I live in a state with brutal winters. It was awful. You can't wear solid blue or red shirts. They didn't want people to start gangs in our small Midwestern town. A group of people rebelled and started wearing leather jackets and slicked back hair and played up the greaser stereotype to show how silly it all was. They all got in trouble and threatened with detentions and ice and school suspension. I'm glad I'm nowhere near that place anymore. We were not allowed to stand in circles at recess. Some teacher was afraid we would get up to something while standing in a circle. In protest we stood in a giant circle, but made sure we were all at least several meters away from the next closest person. When the teacher who initiated the ban on circles noticed what we were doing after 20 minutes, she threw a fit and demanded we stop standing in a circle. We argued that we were all just individuals standing around and turned in different directions. The ban was not enforced after that day. My primary school elementary school introduced a no running rule. Ever. Including and especially at break time, recess, in the playground or on the field. So if you were playing football, no running. Tag, no running. You couldn't play any game that required you to move at more than a fast walk. We developed a lot of games that required standing still and throwing tennis balls to one another using a complex set of rules. You were only allowed to run during PE lessons and under the supervision of a teacher. It only lasted a year, I think, but it was brought and went to kids who weren't looking where they were going, ran into each other, and one ended up with the other's tooth embedded in her forehead. I think I've posted this before somewhere, but here goes. A couple of years after I started my school, Tippuk's whiteout was banned because a girl was chewing a Tippuk's pen and it exploded in her mouth. She was fine, but had to go to hospital for chest x-rays and stuff. So yeah, we weren't allowed to use that anymore in case anyone else was stupid enough to chew on the pens. Not allowed to open the windows because someone might jump out of it. My last year of middle school, 8th grade, the school outlawed silly bands. Don't really remember why, but we were forbidden from wearing them. The following year the school banned backpacks. Literally banned. No one was allowed to have them. A few kids got around it by carrying briefcases. If you want into class late, your grade drops a letter, but if you skip class there is no penalty. At my school they would close the men's toilets for a week if they found someone had been peeing beside the urinal. Not that unreasonable. Except they would close all of them. You would then have to go to the ladies or use the dodgy toilet next to the changing rooms. My school was generally quite good, and they rarely instituted dumb rules like this, but it was rather odd. Luckily, they stopped with it eventually. You weren't allowed to call die dice. They have to be called number cubes, because the name dice is associated with gambling. My school spent a ton of money remodeling/modernizing the library. We now had dynamic workspaces including a group study area and a silent study section, among others. Sounds pretty great, right? The problem was that the group study area was right next to the silent section, meaning the sound carried over when you were doing group assignments. To get around this, the librarian started hawkishly watching the group area, handing out detentions to anyone making noise. So yeah, our dumb rule was that we had to do group assignments in total silence. We weren't allowed to wear sweatshirts because it looked sloppy, but then the administrators wouldn't turn on the heat. In winter, it was a really tiny, rundown private school that was trying to compete with the richer private schools in the state and failing miserably. Shoes must be all black. Now you're probably thinking, huh, normal rule. This was implemented on the first day back from summer. We had no prior warning. On that day, I wore some black shoes with white laces and detailing. So, as punishment, I had to spend all day coloring in my shoes with a Sharpie, as the white on my shoes would disrupt my learning. Yeah, freaking right. No yoga pants. Pretty much every girl in my high school, or at least a majority of the athletes, wore them, and it was deemed as a distraction. In protest, a bunch of male students started wearing them. That was an interesting week. Men had to tuck in their shirts, but not women, cause women wouldn't ever carry a weapon supposedly. We were allowed to have backpacks that weren't see-through, cause the only way one would carry a gun is in their waist. They changed this rule though. Women did have to tuck in their shirts, and I quote the principal, unless if they are fat, then they don't have to. We wouldn't want to embarrass them. This was in 1999 to 2000 in Louisiana. I don't know if college counts, but in my college they would find any excuse to fine you. Someone was bouncing a basketball on my floor at a party. They have a rule where you are not allowed to play sports inside. They found out and came to the floor and fined me $50 because I was the guy who plays basketball without any proof or anything. Bunch of cants. Punishment for snitching. On multiple occasions I got detention for complaining to a teacher about a bully. I even got detention once for getting my own blood on my bully, except for the time someone stole from them. Couldn't talk in the cafeteria at all. Teachers would punish us if the noise level was beyond a whisper. They punished us by making us stand in the summer heat instead of having recess. That almost sounds abusive, depending on where you live. Where I grew up, peak summer heat reached 110 to 120 degrees. We had a track meet in the middle of summer once. The rubber was melting of the runners' shoes. Falling resulted in literal second-degree burns from the scalding hot tarmac. And worst of all, the kids weren't allowed to go get water. It was a huge scandal. A lot of parents threatened to sue. My high school had a stupid rule. For every minute you were late you had to do 2 minutes of in-school detention. One day I was late 1 minute, so I had to do 2 minutes of detention. However, the school started the clock on being late at the first bell, also known as the warning bell. After first bell, students had 5 minutes to get to homeroom. The first bell rang. I walked in a minute late. I was told I had to do 2 minutes of detention. I asked WH. I was told immediately. I went from the main office to the detention room next door, did my 2 minutes, and then went to homeroom. I arrived at homeroom before the late bell. When signing out of the detention room, you had to put down what you learned. I wrote down nothing. I should have written down petty tyrants don't understand the purpose of rules and how to administer them.
N.
We had the usual no skirt/shorts that didn't fall past our fingertips. My problem with this was as an athlete. I played volleyball through most of high school, and on game days, we were expected to dress nice. Still, girls were always getting yelled at for their dresses and skirts being too short on the basis that it would distract the boys. Most were threatened with not being allowed to play or being made to go home and change before they could get on the bus to go if we had to travel. But as soon as we had to play, we were stuck wearing tiny Spanx that suction cup to your ass cheeks and when worn, barely reached my wrist if I attempted to apply the fingertips test. So stupid. We can't wear revealing clothes to school, but you'll expect us to spend a couple hours on the court with our asses hanging out for the whole school and town to see. You would get the longest legal detention time of 2 hours just for chewing gum. It was known as a headmaster's detention because it was for the most severe cases. Maybe not the dumbest rule, but the way they executed the rule. Dress code. I was given a week-long out of school suspension for wearing jeans, not skinny jeans, or ones with rips, or jeggings. Hip huggers, with the bottoms that flared out a bit. The school's reasoning? I was developed on both the top and bottom half and was a major distraction to students and the male faculty. I was like 15. I remember my stepdad picking me up, and as I was walking out, I told the principal that maybe your male staff shouldn't be working around underage kids if they can't control their CCKS. He smacked me upside the head for the comment, but that's all. No visible cell phones on school property, even when school is over. I got chased down the hall by a teacher demanding I give him my phone because I called my dad for a ride home 10 minutes after school was over. When I was in the 9th grade, the senior class prank was to mix laxative in the chicken mix to be used for tacos in the cafeteria. Quite a few people shoot their pants. The administration's response to this stupid prank was to ban tacos from the school lunch. Still pretty pissed about that 16 years later.